Welcome to the Business of Travel, the official podcast of the Global Business Travel Association. I'm Bev Heinrich, Senior Director of Foundation Programs at the GBTA Foundation, and I'll be your host for today's episode. The title of today's podcast is The Future of Business Travel Leadership, Reshape, Reframe, and Reinvigorate. And our guest today is Liz Fraser, who is the Chief Revenue Officer at Serko. So before we get started, Liz, welcome. Thank you so much for your support of GBTA Win It. And I'd love for you to just give a little bit of your own background before we get started.
Sure. Kia ora, Bev. Thank you so much for having me and giving me the opportunity to speak on the GBTA podcast, which is very exciting. My background, I've been at Serko for about 18 months, and most of my career actually was in media. However, I did spend 5 years at Air New Zealand, of which the best job was the regional GM role for the Americas market. So I was based up in Los Angeles for a few years and managed the US and Canada and South American markets. So I have some travel background, some media background, and now at a travel technology growth company, which is very exciting.
Oh, that's great. Well, you're perfect for this topic. So I'm going to just start with a little bit of background on why we selected this topic. We did this together, and I think it's really interesting to look at, this idea of where leadership, business travel leadership is evolving. So in the past, crises were occasional, right? And today, disruption is almost constant, from economic volatility, geopolitical uncertainty, climate impact, and AI transformation, to shifting workforce expectations and burnout epidemics. Leaders who operate in outdated models, rigid hierarchies, denial of vulnerability, resistance to change are breaking under pressure. And when leaders break, teams disengage, innovation stalls, and cultures crack. Organizations can't afford leaders who crumble. They need leaders who bend, adapt, and grow stronger under pressure. And the next generation of talent demands it. The employees today, especially Gen Z and millennials, want to work for authentic, emotionally intelligent, and adaptive leaders. They aren't inspired by perfection. They're inspired by resilience and humanity. They want leaders who model well-being, create psychological safety, and lead with purpose through tough times. So today, Liz, when we're talking, I'm really happy that you like this topic and are ready to kind of tell us where you are in reshaping and reframing your own leadership style as well as that of your organization. So we'll kind of start with this idea around reshaping and reframing. So at the very basic, how do you define your leadership in today's evolving business travel landscape?
Well, Bev, I think leadership today is about navigating ambiguity with clarity and compassion. And as we all know in the business travel industry, change is constant. So whether that be from tech disruption, AI transformation, geopolitical shifts, right through to climate disruptions, and then of course you layer on traveler expectations that are constantly evolving, we're in a constant state of change. So in this environment, it's impossible for leaders to have all the answers. So it's about creating the right conditions for our teams to thrive amid all this uncertainty. And that means being clear on purpose, being transparent in communication, and being attuned to both the employee and, of course, our customer needs. At Serko, it's about building trust, being collaborative, and living by our guiding principles or our values, while at the same time being flexible in our execution. And for me personally, what's most important is showing up with empathy. Because in a people-centric industry like travel, whether it's a traveler navigating disruption or a team member managing change, the human experience is always at the center.
That sounds right. So I know you've said you've only been at Serko for 18 months, but how much do you think that definition has shifted in recent years?
Yeah, I think it's shifted from control to collaboration, from certainty to curiosity. So I think
that's a good way to put it. I like that. I like the curiosity.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the pandemic definitely accelerated this shift. I think we've moved from this top-down decision making to a lot more of co-creation and co-design, where listening, adaptability, and of course, emotional intelligence are just as critical as the strategy. So that's what I believe employees are looking for. Someone with a human touch who shows empathy and can relate to all the change that's happening in this market.
So that leadership reframing, I mean, it's definitely around purpose, priorities, people management. How do you do that to remain effective?
Yeah, I think leaders need to reframe all three of those to stay effective. So purpose must be more than just a slogan, right? It has to help guide decisions. And if you can always come back to your purpose when you're making tough decisions in particular, then it's easier and quicker to move forward with that clarity. And for priorities, they need to flex with all the changing realities around us. As I mentioned earlier, there's so much change in business travel that leaders need to be able to pivot quickly. And that doesn't mean chasing every opportunity. I've certainly seen that at Serko, where we have many opportunities that we could work on, but it does mean staying responsive and being flexible. And we've had to shift priorities a few times this year based on things like market signals and what's happening. And the ability to do this without losing momentum is a real leadership skill in itself. And then the people management side, it continues to evolve, focusing on things like well-being and inclusion and growth. And today's workforce expects more than just a paycheck, right? They want purpose, growth, and really importantly, they want psychological safety, as well as an environment where they feel seen and heard and supported. So, yeah, as leaders, I think we need to reframe all three of these areas.
I love that, because you're right, that command and control idea that used to be there, that's not right. So yeah, when I just was writing down the notes from this section around purpose, curiosity, flexibility, authenticity, well-being, growth, and safety, those aren't words that we probably heard in our earlier careers. So really, that's great.
Correct.
I love that.
That's
So,
right.
yeah, thank you. So let's shift gears for a minute now. Okay, so we reframed, but now leading in the age of AI and empathy. So you've already talked a little bit about empathy, but as we reshape leadership, how do we also lead through the tools of the future? How are you thinking about that at Serko?
Yeah, I think it's a really important question. And I think there's a few leadership traits we need to be aware of, and that's very much curiosity. I think about ethical judgment and also this kind of digital empathy. So what do I mean by those three things? So for me, curiosity is one of the most underrated superpowers for leaders navigating the rise of AI, especially in business travel, where the pace of change is relentless and the stakes are really high. Curiosity, to me, drives understanding and also fuels innovation to help push the boundaries of what's possible. Now, I'm no coder. Leaders don't need to be coders, but they do need to be question askers. And at Serko, we're reimagining the booking experience with a curiosity mindset. For example, we're asking ourselves, how can AI make booking business travel feel effortless, intuitive, or even enjoyable? Imagine that, it's enjoyable to book a business travel trip. And,
Right.
what if we used AI to reduce traveler stress, not just the cost? What if we could predict burnout based on travel patterns? And my travel patterns the last couple of months have been immense. And so, how could you predict that burnout? What if AI could help us design more inclusive travel policies? So I think being curious and pushing yourself to learn more about AI, using the tools yourself and exploring the possibilities that can support you in your role, I think that's really important. The second one here that I talked about is ethical judgment. And I think it's important when making decisions that are not only effective, but are also morally sound and socially responsible. And in the context of AI and data-driven environments, which is where Serko is doggy deep in data, this means things like balancing innovation with integrity and modeling that accountability. For example, when things go wrong, and they will, ethical leaders need to own it, learn from it and course correct publicly. And this, I think, will undoubtedly build trust internally, but also externally with our customers and our partners. An example of this in business travel is ensuring that AI tools don't reinforce bias in travel approvals or in pricing or personalization, or making sure things like sustainability claims are backed by real data and they're not greenwashing. So that's what I mean by that. And then digital empathy is essential as AI becomes really foundational in business travel. It's the ability to understand and respond to human emotions and needs, even when interactions are through technology. And so how do we bring humanity into our digital experiences? And for us, we're always designing with the user in mind. We need to kind of read between the lines or the digital lines. In other words, we need to pick up on those subtle cues such as delays in response or changes in tone or when people go silent. And then we need to check in with those people. So creating I talked about this a little bit, psychological safety online, it's really important. So encouraging openness and respecting people's boundaries and being present, even through a computer screen, is super important. So at Serko, for example, digital empathy might show up in how we design traveler experiences, making sure the interfaces are intuitive, they're inclusive, and ideally stress reducing. I'm really pushing on that. Or in how we support remote teams with tools that foster connection, and not just the productivity, but that, that connection is really important too.
There's a lot in that topic, isn't it? There's a lot to think about in this AI world. And so as a leader, you talked a little bit about it, but as a leader for your teams, how do you maintain that empathy and human connection in this AI enhanced environment?
Yeah, I think staying grounded in human first design, right? So we talk about UX and UI, but this real human first design is important. And at Serko, we're building products with a traveler first lens. We're using AI to simplify complexity, but without losing sight of the traveler or the travel manager. So empathy means understanding that emotional journey behind the data. So like I said, we have lots and lots of data. So really, what's that emotional journey? What's the traveler's intent? Why are they traveling? How can we reduce stress from business travel? And how can we build trust? And what's going to delight them? What's going to make them go, oh, wow, that was really easy or simple, or, I can get on with my day. So that human first design principle, it's really important to us.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Makes sense. Okay, so now we're going to shift a little bit again around culture and purpose post-pandemic. So yeah, we know we had a lot of changes during the, that came along with the pandemic, but what do you see as effective or even ineffective as strategies for reigniting culture and connection? Like, you have a multinational team and you're dealing with a lot of change and acquisition. So how do you see that as what are the effective strategies for your culture within the organization?
Yeah, sure. Great. This is a really great question for Serko because we acquired Get
You've
There
got a
in
lot,
January
right?
this year. Yeah, so we've been integrating our teams and spending a lot of time listening and understanding their processes and ours, etc., right through to setting up new offices and looking on all the different ways of how we work and how we bring our teams together. It's been super fun, but lots and lots of hard work. And being a global company, I think the most important thing is actually leading through our guiding principles. And we talk about these quite a lot at Serko. We've got 4 there: be a good human, win together, dare to simplify, and boldly go beyond. And they've become part of our language, kind of like the way we operate. And they're often talked about through our day-to-day work. And the storytelling of those guiding principles is really powerful, and it's really helped with the integration of Get There. And another strategy is little things like having some rituals. So an example, we have a monthly company meeting and we change the time of day. It alternates from mornings or evenings so that teams in the US, India, China, and other countries can participate, either watching it live or watching the recording later. Our Chief People Officer, Rachel Satherley, has done a tremendous job at supporting us all through the integration of Get There and Serko teams, and supports us to really think hard about building our culture. And what I've learned through this time period is that culture doesn't scale by accident. It scales by intention. So you can't just think that it's going to happen, right? You have to have intention behind building culture. And I think that's a great reminder for everyone. Even if you're not integrating an acquired business, I think it's a really good reminder for people.
Well, I love your first guiding principle of just being a good human. I think we all should just start there. Everybody should write
Yes,
that up. Everybody
that's
writes that on their
fantastic.
notebook. Just be a good
Yeah.
human. That's all it takes.
Exactly, Bev. Exactly. Yeah.
So, how can organizations restore alignment and energy across dispersed teams? And you've talked about that a little bit, but that
Yeah.
restoration, I'm sure you get out of whack every now and then. So, how do you bring it back in and restore that alignment?
Yeah, great. It's for me, it's over the biggest thing here is over communicating. And so it needs to be constant and oh my gosh, it can be tiring. You have one meeting, then you've got to say it again and say it again, and you just got to keep over communicating. But it's probably the most important area to align people and ensure we're all going in the same and the right direction. I think being really clear about what we're trying to achieve and why we're focusing on something and including as many people in this as you can, because inclusion is important. And people want to know why their work matters and how it connects to the bigger picture. So over communicating is a must when you have teams spread across the world.
Right. Right. No, that makes perfect sense. Well, I'm
Yeah.
going to shift over into the things that matter a lot to us at Winit, which is our mentorship and next generation workforce. And kind of, I'm sure everybody's thinking about that as well. So I'm going to just kind of shift you into that mode of around
Great.
inclusive leadership. So first of all, so how can
Yeah.
inclusive leadership drive business advantage in the business travel industry?
Well, I think inclusive leadership isn't just the right thing. It's actually, in my view, the competitive edge, especially in a global, fast evolving world of business travel. When you think about the travelers, they span cultures and languages through to travel managers and suppliers operating across the different regions with different expectations. We really need to understand and find solutions for all this complexity. And so I believe inclusive leadership helps build better product design to help improve adoption and customer satisfaction. And I think that building trust and loyalty with our customers means we have to understand the companies we work with and also reflect their values. So I think it's really important.
Right. Well, and then if I ask you about how you feel about mentorship, because we really see that as a career springboard. So what does mentorship look like in this hybrid digital future? How do you envision the benefits and how you would use mentorship in your world?
So mentorship has to keep evolving in this working hybrid and digital environment. More like from a formal process that's quite top down to a more flexible approach. And I see this as a two-way activity. I've learned as much from emerging leaders as they've learned from me. And if you can create a safe space for growth and feedback, I believe both parties are winners in that. Authenticity is key. So sharing your learnings and your failures, and what's been really hard in your career, it's really important. And having those real conversations, not just the career advice, but getting deeper into those conversations. I think it really helps between the mentor and the mentee. I kind of use this. I think about the role of reverse mentoring. It's really powerful. Where a junior employee mentors a senior employee, and there are
Mhm.
so many learning opportunities in that space. For example, understanding their values, their expectations. They come with different thoughts on customer trends and how they understand them, or even if it's specific topics, if it's about digital fluency that you're wanting to learn, the younger ones are really skilled and trained in that. And so, it's kind of that reverse mentoring, I think, is really important. And mentorship in this digital age, it's not about hierarchy, right? It's about humanity. And it's leaders showing up with, I talked about curiosity, that vulnerability and a willingness to learn from, every voice in the room. I think that's important. And remember, it's not always about the execution of the strategic plans. So we talk a lot about the execution and the outcomes, and or it's imagine the flawless implementation of a cost reduction initiative. It's not always about those things. It's about whether we leave people better than when we met them. Did we nourish and support and encourage them? Did we take the time to coach and give feedback? Were we humble enough to share opportunities? And, I've had some exceptional leaders over the course of my career, and I've learned a lot of those things, which I feel very blessed with.
Wow, that's great. Well, again, be a good human. You're offering humanity.
Yes,
Really
that's
great.
right.
So, and I do think you are looking at this with a really interesting lens. So when you think about that for the future ready skills for emerging leaders, what do you think you would recommend to those new leaders, and what skills should they be developing?
Yeah, I thought a lot about this one because I think it's really important. I'll talk about 3 skills, although I think I've added a 4th one. But the first one is emotional intelligence, and the World Economic Forum projects this now as a necessary skill for 2025 and beyond. So it's not just a nice to have; it's now on their list as a necessary skill. And I thought about this, but robots can't out-human us on caring and compassion. Not yet, at least. So we'll see how that goes. The second one I've got, and I think I talked about this earlier, is around critical thinking. And this feeds into that curiosity and how you can apply this. And have you ever had that moment of meeting someone who is just so kick-ass impressive that you think, geez, I want to be like them when I grow up? I've had that many times in my career.
Yes.
And it's got nothing to do with age. It's just that one day I want to professionally grow up to the level of capability and contribution of someone who you admire and respect. And well, when I find people like that, a common trait is how they ask questions. And in the world of AI, the things that I've been learning, it's all about how good is your prompt engineering to get the best results out. So how can we critically solve a problem that's super important? So I think that's, that critical thinking is absolutely a must. The third one I've got is collaboration or teamwork. So for leadership, this is about co-creating and co-designing, having diverse insights and gathering customer feedback and building that trust across the different time zones. So I think that's a real given. It's a real requirement. And then, I did think about this 4th one. I'd love to have things in 3s, but this 4th one I think is coming through a lot more, and I think it's particularly relevant to business travel, and it's systems thinking. And this is having the ability to think big picture and how a puzzle comes together and connects, and how one area of change can actually impact another area. So it's about solving problems holistically. And in business travel, I've talked about that there's so many moving parts, so much change, how things impact budgets or sustainability or employee well-being. So I think system thinkers don't just solve problems, they learn how to redesign them. So I think that's really important as well.
That I think that sounds like where we need to be heading. So yeah, really good guidance for the next generation of leaders. So our last set of questions, Liz, are really around the global view and leadership crystal ball. So kind of looking a little bit further out. So leadership,
I love
obviously,
a good crystal ball.
you like that? Yes. Yeah. Let's step back and think. So if you're thinking about preparing tomorrow's workforce, which we did just talk about a little bit, but what shifts are you seeing in global leadership as you look further out?
From a global leadership perspective, being globally aware of different cultures, understanding local norms, their communication styles, and their values, I think is super important. You also have to have resilience. So this industry is picking up with pace with AI developments. And so we need to pivot strategies quickly when needed, but at the same time, continue to focus on our long-term purpose. And what's also changing, and has been for a while, is how careers aren't all about going up the ladder with a traditional promotion path. people are shifting sideways to learn new skills, or some are even shifting down to then develop in a whole new area. So having that passion for learning, I think, is really important.
So if you had that crystal ball, what mindset shift or behavior will define the next era of business travel leadership?
Well, my crystal ball says resilience with humanity. So the leaders who thrive will be those who are adaptable, they're emotionally intelligent, and are deeply human in the face of complexity. To expand a bit more on this, it's about using AI to optimize travel while at the same time understanding the traveler's stress and well-being. It's about making some of those tough decisions while listening deeply. It's driving growth while admitting to uncertainty, and it's acting global and local. So I think this really matters in business travel because travel is personal. Even if you're on a business trip, it's all personal. And behind every itinerary, there's a human story, whether it's excitement, I love business travel, whether it's stress or fatigue, you get really tired. And yes, technology is transforming everything, but trust, empathy, and purpose remain irreplaceable in my view. So the paradox of being tech savvy and deeply human is what I believe is the new superpower.
We should just stop right there because I think that is really profound. And I'm just going to say, kind of as if I were going to wrap up and close and what some good takeaways are, because maybe someone has downloaded this as on a good walk, or they're sitting in their hopefully business class or first class seat on a trip and hearing some really great leadership advice. But I think if we recap, obviously there's a lot of evolution, and I think you personally, Liz, and Serko are really demonstrating some really good deeply personal kind of traits and capabilities. So I love what you've been able to tell us. And I would say, kind of to summarize it, to lead effectively in the next decade, leaders have to embrace this dual mindset, that one that champions technology advancement like AI and data, and one that prioritizes empathy, inclusion, and a purpose-driven culture. And the words that you bring into it of curiosity and humanity and resilience and purpose. I think the future belongs to those who can lead with that intelligence and heart. So thank you for your perspectives. I'm going to ask you one last piece of advice for aspiring leaders in the business travel space.
Yeah, I mean, one last piece of advice: don't wait to be ready. Simply lead from wherever you are, ask the bold questions and stay curious, and build your leadership muscle through action. And remember, your authenticity is your advantage, and the future needs leaders who are real, not perfect. So look, thank you, Bev. Thank you so much. Some great questions. I've really enjoyed this. Thanks to GBTA Win It for inviting me onto your podcast today. It's been a real pleasure.
Well, I really appreciate it. I appreciate your time, your thoughts. We appreciate Serko's support, obviously, for GBTA Win It and for our new expansion into the region. So we're excited to build a community in the South Pacific. So we're looking forward to bringing more of the women in business travel into our community. You have been listening to The Business of Travel, the official podcast of the Global Business Travel Association. For more information about GBTA and its work, visit gbta.org, and be sure to rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, thank you for listening.